emotions in the darkness are more powerful than when brought into the light, almost invariably. Thus, what is so fearful to say I'm angry at God, I couldn't even admit that to myself, to bring it into the light is often what dissipates. It's often why it goes away. It's the same thing. I mean, very often you go up to somebody and say, I'm really mad, upset with what you did, I'm angry with you. That's often the catalyst for getting over it. I got that out. She didn't get mad at me, and now we're getting better. Maybe she wasn't so bad. And then the thing we have with God is that God is always forgiving, and is more forgiving than any other person that we know. Yeah, I have. I have a very strong example of mine, yeah. I mean, I've lost track of the young woman that was involved now, but it was like nothing I ever saw. It was scary. And she said she was going to keep it. She wasn't going to get rid of it. It was one of those things she was going to hang on to it. And even though it would destroy herself and was ready to go to hell. No terms. I mean, it's frightening to encounter it. I really only remember it once, where it was that kind of thing. I'll never forget it. It's like me and it's like faith with some alien force. No desire to get rid of it. Huh? Hard to tell. I need to go on.
I just wanted to know, what was her level of fearsome? Could be,
I'd say hurt overcame something else. Pain over the life system overcame everything she experienced. I'm not talking about an ordinary good person walking around like, hi, how are you? I'm not talking about a sociopath.
What's her condition?
Oh, it's bad. I've seen worse. But there was a reaction to it. Look at this next section here. Befriending creativity. We're going to do this a little more briefly so we have some time to reflect on it. So we begin to think about this, what goes wrong in this and what the fox is railing against in a way. One element is simply not using our potential. And the feeling is that many of us have so much more that we could do, and we don't get around to doing it. I remember Bishop Ken Untner, who's such a great guy, and he gave a talk to priests of the Diocese of Toledo, and his big thing was, he said, many priests, he said, are on the verge of being really good, but they never make it. He said the odd thing is it wouldn't take that much effort to really be a good priest, and you don't do it. He said a lot of times it just isn't that much. I mean, some guys could really be good preachers if they had just use one more hour of preparation, or take one workshop. Or some people would be really good at visiting the sick if they just gave more time to it, or sat down in a chair and talked to people. I mean, it's a simple thing. I mean, not talking about world-shaking things. And that struck so many priests. They still remember that. I mean, so many are on the edge of being really good but never get there. And I think that's true with a lot of things, a lot of people. A lot of people could really be a good marriage partner, and they're just close. But the real effort that would make it be really good, they never made. Teachers, whatever. Anyway, that's one way of talking about this idea of undeveloped potential, so we can include ourselves in it, and not just think about those poor people other places who are languishing and not worth holding jobs or something. In other words, I think it's something that we all could reflect on. What potential is there that is just often just a little bit more, and we get over it, make real kind of progress. Second area he brings up has to do with sadomasochism and the bad use of our imagination. They talked a lot about pornography and so on, and the misuse of imagination. That the imagination used fundamentally to control, to hurt, to manipulate, and so on. And how much of that works its way into human relationships. Thirdly, failing to trust our own experience, feeling that someone else always knows better than we do, never sure of our own perceptions of things, and therefore constantly muting our imagination and not getting on with being as creative as we should be. And finally, living totally out of our left brain and neglecting the right brain, on the theory that the left brain is the rational, controlling part, and that we don't ever allow our right brain, the more imaginative, intuitive side, to have any play. Well, we use that as some entree into the whole thing here. We can offer some response. We need to, let me try offer a theology here, that framework for talking about unleashing our creativity. First, an understanding of who we are, our anthropology as usual. And that is to see ourselves in developmental terms, no matter what our age, no matter what our situation, that we always have the opportunity of moving forward, that we're in process. That's so important to see. It's so important about ourselves, so we get down ourselves that we don't have to be perfect now. We're not perfect any time. We have to be in process. We have to be moving forward. One of the very I studied here in New York, that was one of the great things is always that he just inculcated in us so strongly is just remember God is asking you not to make a quantum leap, but just to take one step forward. That's all. That's all you got to do is you're making one step forward, then you can be sure you're on the right path and God is with you. So it has that sense that we are people called to growth and development, and we do it over a period of time. Secondly, we are imaginative creatures. One of the great gifts God gave us is our imagination. We need to talk more about it. Andrew really happens to think that that's the key to the spiritual life, is religious imagination. That an imagination that is well developed, that has, as he likes to say it, warm and comforting images of God, Christ, Mary, and the afterlife, that is our greatest predictor of good religious practice, of making good relationships, of sexual adjustment, of work for social justice. A whole wide range of things we associate with the Christian life. He says greater than even how many years it's a Christian school or something is the quality of your imagination. That's a lot of weight on it. I happen to think there's a lot of truth in that. That it is our images of the great religious realities that are important. So we need to spend more time and energy on our imaging. See, our imagination, it seems to me, are like a grid that is a symbolic grid that we have in our head, in our heart, that it gives us the grid through which we look at the world. It helps us to see, notice certain things in the midst of others. It directs our attention in certain ways, and it gives us a valuation for some aspects of life more than others. It is a symbolic network that is set up as a result of these images. It's like the person who has a poor image of God, heavy moralistic image of God. They are going to feel bad about themselves. They have a poor self-image, and as a result, they're not going to make good relationships. It's that kind of progression that we see, and really has empirical data research to suggest that this is the case. Finally, we are being open to the future. Our very essence is that the future is open-ended to us, that new things are possible as we walk the path of life. Then to say some things about God and who God is for us. And the first notion here would be that precisely the correlate of that God is the one who does new and surprising things. That's what we learn from the history of Israel. Right? When Israel thinks they got it all figured, God opens up some new door to them. God raises up Cyrus, the Persian. He's going to be his leader. He raised up this pagan to help out his own chosen people. God speaks to the foreigners, to the aliens. We see it in the New Testament. Who becomes the great model of faith in Matthew's gospel? Not the scribes and Pharisees you would expect it, not the disciples, the inner circle you would expect. No male member of the Israelite community. It becomes the Syro-Phoenician woman. You read the Gospel of Matthew, according to literary form, you just read this as a story, and look at yourself. Who's the model of faith? The Syro-Phoenician woman is raised up. She's the one that banters with the Lord and has great confidence despite he puts her off even. The disciples, he's trying to bring them in. Get it? I explain it to you again. They don't get it. How does he deal with her? Get away. No, we're not going to mess with this. Don't do this. And she keeps coming back. So who's the model of faith? This Canaanite foreign woman. It's just remarkable, and I don't think that's made up. If you read it, I think you can't come to any other conclusion. She is played up right in the middle of all these people who mess up. The one who's got it does the prime thing. Is the ugly person. So it becomes an understanding who God is. Secondly, I correlate anthropology again. God is the God of the absolute future. There's a lot of ways to image God in terms of positioning. So a lot of times we thought of God as above. God's up there, and our job is to get his attention, so he comes down and does certain things to help us. There's another image of God that's God within. So we meditate and turn in, and we look in there. But another image of God that's worth thinking about is that God is the one who is out front. God's out in front of us. God is the absolute future, as Ronner likes to say. The one who opens up the path for us. It's a God who entices and draws and beckons us into the future, saying, hey, come on, you can do better. Come on, take a step forward. It's almost like a parent dealing with a little kid who's learning how to walk. Come on. God's out in front. Now that's interesting. Different from what we're used to. And it plays into this whole idea of developing our creativity. God says, yeah, you can do it. Come on. Open up doors to open up a path. God of the absolute future. And then there's all of the talk about God as the Spirit. God of I guess we had sort of a disappointing lecture on the Spirit on our Murray lectures. One of our finest Scripture scholars, and many people weren't happy with her talk, and were looking for some sort of a clearer explanation of who the Spirit is. But Spirit's obviously hard to get hold of, but the Spirit is often associated with creativity. The Spirit comes upon people on leashes of power, empowers people to take hold of their own lives. The Spirit is within us. We're temples of the Holy Spirit, and that Spirit is sort of impelling us to get in touch. That Spirit's the source of the potential inside of us, and we need to tap it. And it's often we get more things than we can imagine because of the power of that Spirit. Dynamic energy source could develop that idea. Then there's the maternal imagery of God. And people were telling me they like the maternal image when I write a reflections on that says God says that she will this. And it's God makes that. That's why I did that. I wrote it exactly. I know I wrote it in order to be jarring. Say she to refer to be jarring. It starts out of the notion that God is a male, first of all, and it to be creative, you got to have our thinking jarred. You got to get out of routine and patterns. And very often, they start talking about God in a new way. Can release some of our creativity. So in this case, to talk about God as mother or in maternal imagery can give a sense of being embraced, of nurturing. We can think of the God that way, and that the God's embrace and nurture and encompassing grasp is exactly what gives us the security to be able to venture out, to be able to try new things. And finally, there's an understanding of God revealed to us by Jesus. And someone again told me to make sure I brought this up along the line, and that is I talked before about Christ and his cross, but there's another side to Jesus. Jesus is the one who is with it in life. You think of the Feast of Cana, where he enjoys the party and the celebration. You think of one in touch with nature, talks about the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. No one accused Jesus of being an ascetic like John the Baptist. They rather said he associates with drunkards and gluttons. So Jesus evidently is one who enjoyed life and had a certain zest about human existence. And he is, therefore, in line with this whole positive creation outlook. So Jesus, as Matthew Fox likes to say, he's a poetic storyteller. He tells the stories to get your imagination going, to get you thinking, to start to think of new ways. A lot of the stories don't really make that much sense. I mean, it's hard. If someone told you, what did he mean when he said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's? What did that mean in terms of what was going on there? What did it mean to say that the guy who hired people paid the people? Storyteller, it seems as though they're precisely designed to break up the ordinary patterns of thinking, break us out of the usual perceptions of things. It's not unlike what Buddhist koans are supposed to do. What's the sound of one hand clapping? I mean, it doesn't make sense at one level, and yet that's the way Jesus told the stories. And he didn't explain them. When there's explanations in the Gospels of what the parables meant, it's usually because the later writers put it in. The general theory is that when Jesus told a parable, he didn't explain it. He just told it and let it be there so it would shake up your perception, force you to look at the whole thing in new ways. The parable of the sower and seed is a good example. Most scripture scholars think all that was put in by the church later on about those seeds meant this and that. Jesus taught us didn't need to do that. Told the story, you think about it. You go off and think about it. So that maybe becomes the other part of this whole theology we want to look at here. And then trying to feel my way with time and energy levels and needs. With those two sections, let's do our one-to-one discussion for a couple of minutes, see how much you could assimilate in that, and then we'll come back and do our practical spin-off, and then we'll take a time break again, a long break. Yeah, see? And I didn't elaborate on that, and I will briefly. It is the notion that we are divinized. In the history of theology, in the Eastern Fathers of the Church, you had a very different sense of what grace was all about. In the West, we've had a notion of grace that's more like a thing that God gives us that helps us get to heaven. In the Eastern Fathers, grace was first of all what they called uncreated grace. That was God herself as she gives herself to us. And so we become temples of the Holy Spirit. And we are, as they like to say, we're divinized. We're made like divinity. We have a spark of the divinity inside of us. In fact, they use that kind of language. A lot of the mystics talk that way. That we have a spark, and Meister Eckhart was one of them. I mean, God is so close, we become almost like God. God's born in us, he said. Birthed inside of us. And so there's all that talk in the history of Christianity that makes God very close and transforms us very much so that we become God-like, divinized, and it's not an external thing at all. It's a radical change of who and what we are. And so God lives within us. He doesn't just put a thing in us that we call grace. And that changes our being, our consciousness, our personhood. Everything about us is different. And that's a long history, and that was recovered by my teacher, Karl Rahner, in 1954, who went back and reread the Greek Fathers and redid that whole tradition and said, oh, look at this. We should get this back into the West. So what is grace for Rahner? It's uncreated grace. Grace isn't a thing. It's God himself as he gives himself to us. That's what the divinized form is. Thus, What that means in this term is that that creative principle is inside of us, it's part of us. It's not just God's out here saying, hey, use your brain, use your imagination. It's like the Spirit's inside of us, which is the source of that dynamism and that very intrinsic notion of grace. Why don't we do a couple minutes discussion and then we'll look at our practice. We work that all in and suggesting that there's a greater emphasis on the Spirit today, that God is the figure, the creator, in the Hebrew scriptures and so on, that Christ the Redeemer comes, and then so that this is sort of the time of the Spirit, the age of the church, and that we're more in touch with that. And I was saying that that's actually a classic viewpoint given forth by a fellow by the name of Joel Fiore in the late Middle Ages. But I would rather talk about the one God manifesting self to us in three different modes. And that one God is interacting with us throughout all of history and throughout all of our personal history, so that we are always in touch with the triune God. And it's one God, but that one God is the creator, as we've been talking about, the God, the one who continuously keeps the world in process and so on. And the one God, and we call that one God Father, traditionally, as far as that God's creator. Then we also have the God who appears in history, who walks our earth, and who suffers under Pontius Pilate. And we call that one God as the historical presence of God, the Word, or the Son, or the Logos. And then we have this other thing in life. We have a gift dimension of life. We have surprising things happening. We've got great untapped potential within ourselves. And we say that the one God is the source of that potential and surprising new things we call the Spirit. So that I would rather see us in sort of always in contact with the triune God and doing these threefold things for us. And at various times in our life, we end up emphasizing one or the other. And I think this is a good time for us to emphasize the Spirit. The Spirit helps us to see things we might not have seen, and especially in this section I'm talking about, developing our creativity. We see the Spirit as work. We say, I like to talk these days about the church as a sacrament of the Spirit. Instead of the body of Christ, which is fine, but I like it as sacrament of the Spirit because it gives us a sense that we're all got the Spirit. We're all responsible for the church, and all have our charisms or individual gifts and only have to build this sacrament of the Spirit. So it gives a nice dynamic sense of things. The Spirit, it can't be pinned down easily. We even say it, the Spirit breathes where she wills. Hard to control the Spirit. The Spirit is at work then, and wherever we find creativity and people alive and so on. So I'd like to see a parish be a inspirited parish where everyone's charisms are welcomed and where the energy centers, as I like to say, are multiplied. And people are given a chance to make their contribution to the well-being of the parish. So this is, in a sense, we're just recovering in the Western world the sense of the Spirit. The Eastern world's always had a bigger sense of the Spirit. It's just now that in the Second Vatican Council did very little on the Spirit. Our major theologians have done very little on the Spirit. And now Yves Congar, one of our great theologians, has written a 3-volume work on the Spirit. Now we're starting to see more and more books coming out trying to help us understand who the Spirit is, how that can help our growth. It's good for growth, development. Other questions or comments? Well, all of our spatial imagery about God is very important because it dictates a lot of our reactions to the God. In other words, if God is up there, it's our primary image, then this says a lot about how we'll pray. Because we got to sort of get that God's attention, and that it's almost inevitable that we will think of that God as intervening. If the God is up there, then we have to sort of call that God down now and then to help us to do good things, and that's part of what we think prayer is about. When we build churches like that, Gothic cathedrals are built on that notion of height. It's a soaring feeling. You walk into a Gothic cathedral and the architecture takes you upward. It's a whole sense that the steeple of the church takes you up. God is up there. And people would even talk like that and think, well, God's up. I mean, and so it sets up a whole way we pray about God and think about God and so on. So the spatial imagery is important. The other shift that occurred in spatial imagery was the notion of depth. We moved in the 20th century from height to depth. And that changed things, because then it said, God's already here, all around us, and the way you get in touch with this God is not by looking up, but by going deeper. You get to God by going deeper into your experience, deeper into your consciousness, deeper into your own soul. That's how you find God, because He's the substratum of everything that exists. He's the basis of it all. He's the ground that supports us, the abyss that we feel that when we feel angst or disappointment. So that imagery sets up a whole different set of reactions, emotional feelings. Now, the out front imagery was developed by the theologians of hope and the people who wanted to change systems and structures. They developed that because they didn't want us to get fixed like everything is just set in concrete. This is the way the world is. It's patriarchal, and that's how it always has been. It'll always be that way. It's hierarchical in the church, and that's the way it was and it always will be. What these people wanted to do is to relativize the systems. They wanted to show that it's not absolute the way it is set up. And the way they did, part of their change of imagery of God was to show that God was the God of the future, who's calling this group, this pilgrim church, or this society into an unknown future where the structures could change, where we might have to organize ourselves differently to get the job done, where we might have to have more democratic procedures in the church, or we might have to attack the capitalistic system. So a lot of these people are the political theologians, the ones who are interested in macro structures, the larger workings of the economy and so on, that develop this idea of God of the future and God of the who's calling us forward. In fact, Rahner developed the idea in dialogue with the Marxists. See, it's interesting because the Marxists kept talking about we're going to create a better future. We're going to have the classless society. They got a 5-year plan. They always had 5-year plans, right? They're going to get the economy going, get the farming going better in the Soviet Union. And it was always future-oriented. So when Christians started talking to Marxists, and Rahner was very much a part of that dialogue, he said, we got to talk about a God in a way that will challenge them and connect in with their experience. So he said, God is the one of absolute futures, not a 5-year plan. God's the one who does unsurprising things, unknowable things, and He draws us in. So you can't sacrifice individuals for the 5-year plan. You can't sacrifice individuals for the new collective farming system you want to have, as Stalin did. That's wrong. You've got to be open to God operating in different ways. You can't pin Him down like that. So it's a very effective image then to talk about. I transformed it from the social, political sphere as it was developed into a personal thing and saying, well, yeah, if we think of God for us like that, it's interesting image. It's very enticing. It's almost sexual imagery of God enticing, drawing, attracting into the future. So it moves us out of our lethargy and out of dead center and sitting there watching the tube for 2 more hours or whatever. I'm not against escapist entertainment. I didn't mean that way. I think it's necessary in today's world a lot of times. Everybody's got their own escapism. And so I didn't mean it that way. But it was a drawing out of anything that would hold us back. I never thought of that before, but the mother with the child saying, take the steps, has that feeling to me. can walk, come on. Think for yourself. Trust your experience. It's almost like God's saying that to us. In fact, the more I say that, the more I like it. Take your own legs, you know. I'll support you. But you got to walk on your own. I'm here. I'll catch you. It's a very masculine image along that line. That God will catch us. Because we men are terribly afraid of failing. That becomes our dominant sense. I'm afraid to fail. And we talk about what would keep us from being creative. We're afraid that people make fun of us or that it won't work. And then we got to deal with failure. And this image is almost telling us men, hey, okay, so you might fail. There's a God who's with you. He'll pick you up, support you. In this very masculine image of God in ways. Very cool. For the particular male psyche. So I was trying to blend it with the eternal image. It would be much more bonding, close, company embracing. Of the relationship God would have with us. Right? Yeah. Wouldn't because no. Yeah, go ahead. I was. Right. Yeah. Nicely, that's important to the community. All of our images of God in it. If we don't know that, we're in big trouble. And the way it gets enriched and challenged is by groups. Other people having different images. That's why it's so essential to raise up the maternal imagery of God today. So essential for both men and women. Because there's a whole bunch of experience that feeds into the overall picture of God that's been negated. That hasn't been brought into the church, the language hasn't been there, the imagery hasn't been used. Thus, we all are reduced. And we're all truncated in a way because that doesn't happen. And when we don't have in Chinese indigenous Christianity, when they wanted to make Chinese religion be like European religion, you don't get it. Oh, what is Mike talking about the images of God? Oh, the way they think, if I've got it right, it's something about God being their very word for God in a tongue, the tribe, gives a sense of relationship of God. In other words, the Tongas never walk alone. You never see them alone. Because the wild animals might get you if you're walking there. You always have to be with somebody. And you have to have a communal sense of life. Therefore, their image of God correlates with that. I can't exactly remember the right words, but my feeling was that they had a feeling of God who was the basis of that community, the one who draws people together and keeps you in groups. I can't think of the word for it. But yes, and so if we don't have the Tonga experience in our mix, we're missing something. Or put it positively, to hear people talk about how the Tongas see and feel God gives us something we might have missed. Very important to enrich. That's why we have dialogue. That's why husbands and wives ought to talk to one another about deeper feelings about God. And then we learn from one another all that. Well, people heard it. It might have been a tape I did. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, yeah. just to buttress that, Thomas Aquinas said, who died in 1274, the great Orthodox theologian, that even in heaven, God remains incomprehensible. And what that suggests, and what Karl Rahner picked up on that notion, if God remains inexhaustible, incomprehensible, that means that in the life of heaven, we would continue to grow and develop endlessly. And instead of thinking about it as a static period you get to, and that's the end of it, and sitting in a rocking chair paragraph, it's got a vitality to it. And I mean, I think it makes perfect sense that we would continue to grow and develop in heaven. And as you said, I think many people respond positively with that. Sounds good. Feels right, yeah. The difference about heaven would be that there would be a fundamental assurance that that one was not going to go backwards, that there was no options to move in another direction. The growth would be steady and ongoing, which is probably one of the things that would make us happy, take away the fear. Hard to speculate. I mean, well, heaven, you should be careful about speculating what that's all about, but somehow it is a place of fulfillment and happiness for us, or a state of being, or a way of living. And I see nothing wrong with saying that it would be have a continual growth. So I was going to try to say something about its creativity and so on. One of the things Fox suggests is that we allow our creativity to come out in simple ways, that we don't have to create a great piece of artwork, but some people might want to just do it by writing very freely in a journal and letting themselves write whatever they like and not programming or monitoring it, but just let it flow. Some people might want to exercise a gift in gardening. You know, a lot of these creation spirituality people put that forward as a good thing to do, the gardening idea, carpentry, or any number of things that maybe haven't been tapped. I think people often think that way, you know, they're going to wait till they retire and then they're going to build cabinets or something. Well, maybe they ought to think how to build a cabinet before they retire. You know? In other words, it seems like it's a matter of programming in some creative outlets for ourselves as we go along. Next would be all of our efforts to release the right brain activity, and a lot of times that seems to be repetitive things, like meditating, doing breathing meditation. Fox mentions that, like transcendental meditation, breathing in and saying the same prayer as you let your breath out. I like to do that, and I find I get a lot of my best thoughts that way. The theory is that shuts down your left brain and releases your right brain, and that's why more creative moments would come. So that I think that's true of any repetitive kind of activity, like jogging or saying the rosary. Those things that have a sameness to it shut down the rational, calculating side of things and release the other side. One of the ways I like to prepare for talks or homilies is to read a bunch of material and then go jogging. And then I don't think like, well, what am I going to say next, or how would that sort out, or what would point 3 be? But I just try to let my mind be blank and just go. And then I will find very often that while I'm doing that, it'll solidify. I'll see it, how I want it to be. I'm not trying to see what it's like. It happens when I'm not trying to see while I'm jogging. The same way with meditating. I think that's when the capacity of the right brain is to see things whole, rather than to analyze and parse out. So I think releasing that is part of the way we release our creativity. Some people feel, Andy Greeley feels that one of the things that enabled him to write all these novels was being hypnotized. And that hypnosis released some things for him. I tried that. It does do something to you. I'd be hard-pressed to say. I think that something did happen. But I can't remember what it was. That's right. It was all part of the Rolfing hypnosis. I tried everything. Acupuncture, you name it. But I don't know. But anyway, Greeley was of the opinion that that could release some of this creative side. But I think Fox's his great phrase is art and meditation. And that becomes his great catchphrase for what he wants us to do. We have to have art and meditation. And I guess one of the things he likes people to do is to draw things, but or to work on pottery. Oh, that was it, to work on pottery in the dark. So that no one could make judgments about whether it was good or bad, and you weren't judging yourself whether it was good or bad. So his great thing is that it's fear that impedes our creativity. And so if you can get beyond that and get in a non-judgmental situation, that you'll be able to loosen up a little bit and be able to allow some of this to come out. That'd be interesting. You could turn all the lights out and draw pictures for a while. See what happens. No, isn't it? I mean, you talk to the people who teach. We got people in here who teach little kids, and you know they're creative and they'll do things, and then you talk to them, and they, later on, and they're not creative, and you ask what happened along the way. It's too bad. Maybe we got to find our ways to get that juices flowing for ourselves. One of the things, I know, has to do with overcoming fears. Maybe that's what hypnosis does in a sense. It allows you to get beyond some of that. And finally, the importance of play. Play is something that is purposeless, that is not programmed, that has a different feel to it. Connects in with the whole Sabbath idea, that maybe we shouldn't just rest on the Sabbath, but it's a good day to play. And play, again, allows something else to come out in us, that we're not so worried about the watch at that time, and but we are into some new frame of reference that gives a different feel for life. So that what would it would turn around if we said that we really work for the sake of play. And play is what we're all about as humans, and therefore that's what the Greeks said. Aristotle had that idea. You work for the sake of leisure. Instead of the other way around, we have leisure so we get enough energy left to then go back to work. We take rest periods, vacations, so we can get ourselves together again for the sake of work. And you begin to wonder, is that the way life's supposed to be? And maybe there's a redress of balance here that would help us see things in a different way. Play then could become our, one of those releasing mechanisms again for the life of the spirit, our creativity. Comments on befriending creativity, or ideas people would have to how we're going to release this side, or befriend that side. Capitalize on the more creative side of our work, the more enjoyable, pleasurable side. That would fit in with a lot of what we've been saying here about the creativity and the pleasure idea. Find that in our work. They got work like that? Did that happen? Yeah. Tricia, you know about that. Working with a little one.
We have fun every day.
That's right. If you can keep your head straight.
Yeah.
And not let them get to you, right? But that's a lot of the kind of teaching you do is to release the creativity.
Oh, yeah.
To get them going. Then we have to keep it.
With adults, it would seem that if people actually thought about what they're looking at during their day's time, their creativity could
could be released. For instance, we were sitting in a circle talking about funny things that have happened, and he said, "Oh, so many more things have happened to you." And I stopped and I started asking him about certain things that I knew had happened to this group of people, and I never thought of those as being interesting. But people just absolutely don't look at the world around them. In a day's time, there must be 300, 400 noteworthy things that happen to people, and we walk around in a daze. We don't pay attention to them, we don't write them down, we don't comment on them. We don't write them down, we don't comment. Now, I'm the other way around, unfortunately, and it's just as big a curse as not being able to release the creativity. It's as big a curse to have it constantly turned on. If you're not getting the head of the fire.
Reminds me of Tolstoy. That was the set of Tolstoy. He couldn't turn it off. He saw everything, noticed everything, wanted to process everything, and it became a great, terrible cross. I guess writers, novelists are often like that. But, as you say, I think the more common problem is the failure to notice. And part of what this whole spirituality is doing is to try to sharpen our awareness. In doing so, in this phase at least, to therefore release the connection between things, release some of our creativity.
Yeah. With that, develop that. People that I employ the most of those people class people and that helps create that sense of relaxation and everything else.
See that happen in groups, don't you? I think humor is important in math and the literacy. I do.
It is.
I mean, I think that for the very same reason. I think humor is, and Peter Berger wrote the book called Rumors of Angels, and what he was looking for, what he called the signals of transcendence. What are there in life that reveal the gods to us? And two of those that he picked were play and humor. Had other ones, but as being especially powerful in revealing the infinite to us. Humor relativizes situations and causes us to not take ourselves so seriously. Opens up.
In regards to play, those are things people, especially maybe many people, work so hard at play that they can make that a real work activity, no matter what they're doing, but they don't realize really the joy out of the play activity. And then try to play on it.
Play becomes an extension of work, very common problem. Going on vacation becomes one more bit of work. Got to be efficient and get it done and accomplish and do everything. People come back more tired than when they left. Very common. So we do it. I mean, we get so programmed. It's the thing we were talking about before, of going through the museum or whatever. Someone is telling me at the break the idea of going, the work way of going to the zoo is, you get in, you find the entrance there, you get in, and you go through everything, see everything, and work your way efficiently out the exit. The other way of going to the zoo is go find your favorite animal and spend the rest of the day with them. It's a different feel. It's a different sense of how one would live life. And we're so programmed the other way, we can hardly imagine doing that. Sometimes in liturgies we tried having people take their watches off. You realize how many people, at times people look at their watches during Mass? Yeah, right. Including the celebrant.
Yeah, you are.
I I took mine by looked behind, knowing it was there. I mean, yeah, it becomes part of us, way of life. To live some other way, it needs some sort of sea change, some radical shift. Which I'm not sure how. That's why I like Sydney's idea about trying to find some things in our work, because a lot of us are never going to be able to make that sharp a change. We're never going to make leisure and letting go that much a part of our being. Doesn't look promising anyway. Of course, God does surprising things, doesn't he? Never know. I'm conscious of timing and giving people a chance. Yes, I think we better make the final comment, and then we'll see if I missed something. Who hasn't had a chance to say anything?
I have a picture of California's grandson. He said over dinner he was talking about every single day. And he's creative gratefulness and has a terrific sense of humor. We see everything in his life because of it.
People here, Cambodian, living in the family. No. And it's a great example of that changing perspective. Seeing things from another viewpoint.
I think it's very different from the parents are in some like to do in Halloween. Halloween is usually something the kids are all playing and so go to I mean, tired where they're trying to watch the film and how they laugh.
Highlights the extent of the problem, major one. And then you get into routines, and life gets a matter of the bureaucracy to make you live and getting patterns. Well, I think what I would suggest we do is to take a break and then reassemble. We're going to have Mass at no later than 5:15. Maybe just a little bit earlier. Why don't we say we take time for people to, again, process the material any way that you care to, and then let's reassemble about 10 after or so in here. And yeah, we're going to have Mass right in here. Oh, that's right.